He thought about humiliating a black woman by accusing her of theft in the supermarket, but regretted it. Amina was exhausted. It had been a long and intense day at the law firm where she had worked for years. As one of the most respected civil rights lawyers, she often found herself faced with cases that pushed her to push her limits. Heavy files, fiery pleadings, injustices to denounce, victims to defend. Sometimes she felt completely overwhelmed by fatigue, by the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders. But that evening, after hours of tireless work, she needed to take a break, to relax a little, to find some semblance of normalcy. She chose the local supermarket, a place she rarely frequented, but which seemed to offer good products at reasonable prices. It was an upscale supermarket, with its well-lit aisles and neatly arranged shelves. Amina wasn't a big consumer of luxury goods, but after such a tiring day, she just wanted to find fresh ingredients to prepare a simple and tasty meal.
Maybe a little comfort in the kitchen.
As she entered, she quickly realized that she was one of the few people of color in this place, a supermarket that seemed to attract an elegant, neatly dressed clientele. White faces, often marked by polite smiles and shifty glances. Customers who already seemed to have their place in this perfect setting, that of a society where the codes of comfort were made for them. But Amina didn't make a big deal of it. She was used to this kind of furtive glance, this invisible but palpable unease. His clothes were simple, faded jeans, a discreet coat, without extravagance. She wasn't there to be noticed, just to do your shopping. But attention still attracted him. She had barely passed the automatic doors when she felt like she was being watched. A security guard, a man in his 40s, scrutinized her from afar. Her eyes were piercing, almost calculating, as if every movement she made in the aisles aroused in him a doubt, a suspicion. Amina was not one to be intimidated, but she felt a strange tension take over her. The weight of this gaze that followed her. It was the look of someone who, in an unequal world, had the power to decide, to judge, to put someone in their place. She knew that this type of situation was not uncommon. Racial prejudice often found its way into the most unexpected places, in more insidious but equally violent forms. And this security guard, this simple man in uniform, seemed to embody this systemic injustice. However, she wasn't going to let it happen. She was used to standing up straight in the face of discrimination, not letting herself be brought down by accusatory looks. She hadn't made a single wrong move. She wasn't going to be the scapegoat for her skin color, or her status as an outsider in this supposedly perfect universe. She picked up a basket and began to focus on her shopping list. Fresh vegetables, spices, a few products for his evening dinner. But with each ray she crossed, the look of the security guard was always there, insistent and calculating, like an invisible but oppressive presence. Amina didn't dare confront him head-on, but she felt her discomfort growing. He followed her at a distance, like a shadow, and yet he hadn't moved. He observed her from afar, like a predator watching for its prey. With every movement, he seemed to be waiting for her to make the slightest mistake. That his actions betray a guilty intention. As she walked towards the register, her heart sank. Finally, she would be able to put an end to this strange tension. But the security guard approached her, with an urgent, almost authoritarian air. Before she could even take out her wallet to pay, he blocked her. "I'm going to have to ask you to follow me," he said, his voice low but with a chilling firmness. Amina looked at him, a mixture of surprise, disbelief and growing anger in her eyes. She hadn't anticipated this kind of situation. She had thought he wouldn't go through with it, that this curious look would just be a brief intrusion, without consequence. But no. It was too easy. His gaze hardened. "Excuse me," she replied, her tone calm, but with a touch of defiance. "I saw you putting items in your bag without scanning them." "I'll have to check," he said, almost satisfied with his own alertness. Amina felt a wave of anger rise within her, a feeling of revolt that invaded her body. "Jaudare." He had followed her throughout her journey through the shelves, and now he was accusing her for no reason. It was an unfounded, absurd accusation. She hadn't stolen anything, and he knew it. But he persisted, with the arrogance of someone who believes his authority is incontestable. His eyes were full of certainty, as if what he was saying was an indisputable truth, imposed by the simple fact that he wore a uniform. He thought that her appearance, her skin, her posture, everything he perceived about her, gave her power. He believed that his mere presence could make him a judge.
Anexikjuschene.
Amina took a deep breath, standing straight, refusing to let her anger take over. She had to keep calm. She couldn't give him that satisfaction. I didn't steal anything, she said, closing her eyes for a moment to calm herself. His voice was firm, but also soft, as if to calm the inner tumult.
Please, I just paid for all that.
He then smiled at her, a false smile, which betrayed a mixture of arrogance and contempt, a smile which almost disgusted her. It wasn't compassion he was showing. It was a form of misplaced superiority.
I don't believe you.
I'll check, he said, reaching out to dig into his bag. Amina, shocked by the security guard's audacity, slowly placed her bag on the checkout table, without the slightest resistance. Part of her wanted to explode in anger, but she knew it would do no good. She had learned through years of hard work in civil rights that self-control was her most powerful weapon in such situations. As he began to search his bag insistently, a crowd of customers began to crowd around them, their looks curious and sometimes judgmental. Phones rose quickly, their screens capturing every movement. Amina felt her insides twist at the thought of her dignity becoming a spectacle for strangers, but she was not going to give in to the pressure. She remained calm, but every cell in her body revolted against the injustice unfolding before her. I'm going to call the police, the security guard said in a deliberately threatening tone, as if he thought an appeal to authority would be the ultimate proof of his power, of his domination over her. He believed the appeal would be validation of his action, a way to further humiliate Amina by exposing her to the authorities. However, Amina was not one to be intimidated. She slowly turned her head towards the cashier, her eyes icy calm. Can you please verify my transaction? I just paid, as you can see. She held out the receipt, her voice firm but measured. The cashier, visibly uncomfortable under the weight of the situation, took the receipt with a trembling hand. She scanned the barcode, her eyes glued to the terminal screen. A heavy silence settled. The seconds ticked by as the system screen showed all items had been paid for, no items unscanned. The cashier froze. The truth was there, in all its simplicity. Amina had paid, and the security guard had been wrong, a misunderstanding based on nothing more than prejudice. Amina showed neither joy nor satisfaction in her eyes. She didn't need this. She spoke to the security guard in a soft but implacable voice. I proved to you that I paid. And yet, you insisted on humiliating me, just because I am black. The murmur that rose around them, like a collective breath, made the tension rise in the air. Some customers looked at each other, as if seeking confirmation, validation of what they had just seen. Looks were divided between embarrassment, incomprehension, and anger. The security guard, now caught in the grip of the truth, slowly understood his mistake. He took a step back, his pale face turning red with shame. However, instead of apologizing, he just grumbled a few inaudible words, downplaying the situation. I'm sorry, but there was a mistake.
A mistake.
Amina repeated, her steely gaze becoming even more piercing, like an arrow piercing the mists of denial. It wasn't a mistake. It was discrimination. And now you have to face the consequences.
The whispers grew louder.
A feeling of unease set in. The customers who had witnessed the scene turned towards each other, some shaking their heads in disgust, others lowering their eyes, unable to face the truth. But Amina does not give in. She knew the cost of standing up against injustice, but she was willing to pay that price. The next day, video of the incident, taken by an anonymous witness, went viral. Images of Amina, calm and dignified, defying the arrogant security guard, were circulating on all social media platforms. The contrast between his implacable calm and the arrogance of the security guard shocked public opinion. Thousands of comments poured in, denouncing the unfair humiliation she had suffered, and expressing their solidarity. Civil rights organizations began organizing actions in support, and hashtags calling for justice for Amina flooded news feeds. The media, after a quick investigation, reported on the incident. The press echoed the courage of Amina, who, despite the humiliation, had faced this discrimination with dignity. But it wasn't just about denouncing the incident, it was about opening a discussion about how racism manifests itself in the most innocuous places of everyday life. Calls for legal action grew. The pressure was building, and Amina knew she now had a platform to make her voice heard. She decided to file a complaint against the security guard and the supermarket for racial discrimination and unfair treatment. But more than that, she wanted to send a message. These discriminations, even small ones, were not acceptable. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The legal system wasn't always on her side, but she believed her fight could make a difference, if only to make people more aware of their own biases. Amina engaged in this fight, not only for herself, but for all those who silently suffered similar humiliations on a daily basis. Her path would be strewn with pitfalls, but she was ready to face it all, with the same determination that had allowed her to rise among the most respected lawyers in the country. His goal was not just to win a case, but to participate in a change of mentality. Because, according to Amina, the real fight did not lie only in the legal victory, but in the very process of confronting it. In court, Amina carried herself with a calm determination that impressed even the judges. As she presented her arguments with precision, she revealed information that had the effect of a bombshell. She had been careful until then, not to mention certain aspects of her identity, preferring to let the procedure take its course without trying to play on her status. But that day, in this courtroom filled with expectations and curious looks, she decided to bring the truth out into the open. "I'm not just a lawyer," she began, her voice echoing in the silent space of the courtroom. "I'm also a civil rights activist. And as such, I founded a charity aimed at training underprivileged young people in human rights and giving them the tools to speak out against racism." Amina's words fell like an avalanche. The prosecutor's gaze became more intense, that of the judge more scrutinizing. She explained that she had personally financed an education program, which allowed young people to understand the mechanisms of racism, but also to learn to defend themselves against it, to denounce it and to campaign against it. This program had reached hundreds of young people, in neighborhoods where inequalities were a daily reality. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink into the minds of those present. Then, in a firm but full of conviction tone, she continued, "My fight cannot be reduced to a single personal cause. It is not just an affront against my dignity as an individual. It is a fight for all those who, like me, are victims of invisible, systematic discrimination, which we hide behind daily actions, hasty judgments, prejudices anchored in our consciences." The impact of his words resonated through the room, and you could see that even the defense attorneys, who had previously underestimated the strength of his position, began to perk up. Amina was not a simple victim in this story. She was a leader, a strong woman, engaged in a long-term fight for profound change in society. Under increasing pressure from the media and the public, the supermarket was eventually forced to issue a public and official apology, an acknowledgement of its mistake which, although late, marked a turning point. The security guard, whose racist and degrading attitude had caused the incident, was dismissed for professional misconduct. But that wasn't all. In the wake of this victory, the supermarket took steps to avoid future discrimination. A diversity awareness program was launched, not only for employees, but also for managers and senior executives of the company. The idea was to create a culture of tolerance, understanding, and respect in every corner of this great brand, so that a situation like this can never happen again. Amina had not only won a court case. She had torn off a piece of the invisible wall of discrimination, a wall that is often invisible to those who do not experience it, but which is nevertheless very real to those who are its victims. In his mind, the victory was not simply legal, it was symbolic. She knew it was just a small battle in a much bigger war, but each victory, no matter how small, was a step toward a more just world. Back home, after the long day in court, Amina collapsed on her sofa, exhausted but proud. The tension of the last few days gave way to a deep inner satisfaction. She had carried the voice of those who could not be heard. She had carried the voice of invisible victims, people of color who suffered in silence, and she had done it with dignity. But she also knew that this victory was only the beginning. The road would still be long, strewn with pitfalls, challenges, and resistance. Racism was not a monster that could be killed with a single blow. It was a many-headed hydra that had to be fought relentlessly. Amina thought of all the people who had shared her cause, those who had watched the viral video, those who had supported her fight. She had touched something deep in the collective unconscious. Awareness was growing, and even if she did not yet see the immediate effects, she knew that the seed she had sown would one day bear fruit. True power, she believed, does not lie in the ability to dominate, to assert one's authority over others. It lies in the ability to remain calm in the face of adversity, to maintain one's dignity in the most humiliating moments. Amina had proven it. And if this victory belonged to her, it also belonged to all those who, like her, were tired of fighting but who, every day, got up to continue fighting. For them, this victory was theirs too. And together they were stronger.